Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Commissioner Devine.
Here.
Commissioner Joka.
Here.
Commissioner Perney.
Here.
Commissioner Vanier.
Here.
Would you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have an item we'd like to have added to our agenda.
We need a motion just Mayor, I'd like to move that we add an item to the agenda at the end of the meeting for an executive session regarding a matter subject to the attorney-client privilege.
Is there a second to add that to the agenda?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we add an executive session to the end of administration on the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. The next item on our agenda is a citizens forum. It's a time set aside for any citizen to address any issue that they would like to bring before the City Commission that is not on our agenda today. Is there any citizens that would like to come forward? Please give us your name and address.
Don Timmel, 534 Upper Mill Heights Drive, Salina.
Yes, Don.
In the last month or so since we had the meeting with Kansas Wesleyan on water, and since we talked here before you about water, I've been thinking a number of things and talking with people like at Art Rush and other civic things, and the impression I'm getting from people is that the City Commission isn't really working on the water. We don't hear much about it. And my answer to that was, I'm sure it's on somebody's mind down there because this is all important and probably more important than anything that we've got to talk about. And my friends from Wilson here, I'm going to say, some people said, well, all they seem to be talking about water is the ponds on the bridge. And I said, well, that's got to be taken care of too, but that's not the big problem. Anyway, so I'm retired, so you get to think a little more than some people. And I thought about things that happened to my house. When I moved in my present house, and some of you who know where I live, it's a long ranch-style house, 80, 90 feet long. And I stood there in mornings and I couldn't get hot water. And I just ran water, and we weren't worried about water in those days. And ran water, and I thought, well, I got to put a hot water heater up on this end of the house. And so I talked to somebody, and they said, no, you can, here comes a plumber, and he knows what to do. And he put a little pump on the hot water, about the size of Debbie's little cup there, and it's an electric, and it takes me less than 10 seconds to get hot water from the north end of the house now. So I thought about a couple more things, and I read, if you remember when Hayes had their problem a number of years ago with water, well, they still have a problem, but they went all out in the city about trying to think of things to do small that maybe we're making a statement to everybody, no car washes on these days and blah, blah, blah. Well, we have city watering restrictions, so I'll get to the point. What about all new construction houses, all new construction apartments, and all permitted remodeling of bathrooms? Permitting means, in my opinion, you know, I could go out and buy a stool at Lowe's, and if I knew what I was doing, I could put a new stool in. But permitting means if you had to do electrical or something, if you had to get a permit from the city to do what you were doing in the bathroom, you would put in low-flow toilets in every one of those new buildings, houses, apartments, you name it, offices, et cetera, where there was remodeling or new. Secondly, maybe low-flow sinks. And third, these little pumps to make sure, square foot-wise, and Donnie, you know, I don't know if we could put into a resolution so much square foot in a house before you had to put those in at such length that the hot water heater had to run, but those things work up and down as well as they do laterally. And that would save one heck of a lot of water. Now, at the water meeting, if those of you that didn't attend at Wesleyan, it kind of was an abrupt upjerk, but some 80% of the water that's used in our area from Canopolis is agriculture, and the rest is for the cities like us, and somebody said flushing their stools and things of that nature. So we don't use a lot of the water that is being used from Canopolis, but our share of it could be cut by maybe doing some of these procedures, and it may be ceremonial and it may be not, And I'm sure some people would be upset and say, oh, it's going to raise the price of houses X. Well, it's not going to raise the prices probably much of anything to put these in new construction, et cetera. And it might be a plus to say that we as a city are going forward with this type of thing. So I just present that as something, as a PR thing the City Commission could use, and the city to keep in the front of things on this water problem, on what we're going to do as a city and possibly a county to let other people know in the region, we think this is a mess we're in, and that headline, Bleak, the other day wasn't much fun to look at.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Don, thank you for coming and presenting this to us, and we appreciate the fact that you do have the time to think and keep thinking, because it's through people like you that bring forth ideas that help us understand where we're really heading. The city staff is not sitting on the sidelines doing nothing about this whole water issue. As you can see by reading the newspaper, there are a lot of different issues that are going on with the Kansas Water Office, with the Corps of Engineers, with Canopolis, with the agricultural issues. It's definitely a delicate balancing act at best to try to determine where this is all going to shake out. And I think everybody's sitting, waiting, and well, maybe it'll rain enough to where it's going to go away. We all know that's not the case. We all know that conservation is a major component to our lifestyle that we haven't been willing to face up to, and I think we're to that point now that we have to do that. Your ideas on low-flow toilets and those things, those are already implemented in the building code requirements. But as far as replacement toilets, that's where the majority of the high-volume toilets are out there. And so you're seeing that as being a good approach. The shower head approach, the car washing, the lawn watering, being able to live within our environment the way we need to, I think is very important. And so I appreciate you bringing it to the Commission's attention. Understand that there are things that are happening to try to determine how this is all going to shake out for Salina. But Salina has to face up to the fact that we have to conserve. Water is a very valuable resource, probably the most valuable resource that we have. This discussion about pipelines and moving water from one watershed to another, we all need to stand up and make sure that that does not happen, because that's all based on the number of people that you have on one side versus the other voting as far as where the water is going to end up. And it shouldn't be about who has the most votes. It should be where the water is supposed to be from a natural standpoint. And I think most people that understand how watershed districts work and how water flows across this country will understand that as it moves forward. But we do have to conserve, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other citizen that would like to address the Commission? Moving on, next item on our agenda is items 4 is awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, Resolution Number 076361, expressing gratitude and appreciation to firefighter paramedic Jane F. Steen for her employment with the City of Salina from January 1, 1983 to March 17, 2007. Item 4.2, Resolution Number 076362, expressing gratitude and appreciation to Training Division Chief Willis A. Sutton for his employment with the City of Salina from December 5th, 1975 to March 15, 2007.
We have two resolutions. Is there a motion for approval of those resolutions?
Mayor Mards, I move approval of resolutions 076361 and 076362 with gratitude to both of these employees.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolutions 076361 and 076362. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And from the City Commission standpoint, we do appreciate the service that these two individuals have given to the city over all these years. Thank you very much.
You have plaques.
We have plaques for the two people here. Would they come forward? Thank you very much. Thank you. Would either of you like to say anything?
Jane's pretty quiet. I will say this, that she was here when this city fire department and the county EMS service joined back in, what, 1983, is that right? Yes, she was one of the initial ones there, and she's come and worked within the organization and always benefited the fire service. I think that her bearing speaks for itself, and what the department thinks of her means a very great deal. And it's going to be a great loss for us for her to retire, and we're certainly sad to see her go. The fire department wishes her well, so she's pretty quiet. She does a wonderful job. If you ever need a paramedic, she's the one you want to have show up. Because she will save your life. Thank you. And Chief Sutton, he has been here for 31 years, had all sorts of positions within the department, done a wonderful job as a company officer, supervising our firefighters, got into training, did that job, and I think that you have no higher calling than training firefighters for the next generation. Certainly since I started here, he's been a wonderful addition to me. He's been my right hand here. When I didn't know what was, I would ask him what's taking place. So he's been wonderful to me, wonderful to this department, and 31 years of service to this community and citizens. Congratulations. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing to consider a petition requesting the vacation of an alley right-of-way located in the Elm Grove addition. Sub-item 5.1A, first reading ordinance number 07-10376.
Staff report, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This item was continued at your previous meeting of February 26th. The staff had identified that there were additional owners that own property on the east side of this alley right-of-way, and they had not been included in the notification, nor were they on the petition. They have since received written notification. We gave them a deadline for submitting a written objection, and we did not hear objections from any of the affected property owners on the east. So our recommendation would be to move forward with the vacation of this alley. We did confirm that it is in fact a 12-foot alley and not 10-foot as originally stated, and we think that the attached ordinance is in order for consideration today.
Okay, thank you. Questions of staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Mars. Have you received the complete screening plan, a license application, or a legal description of the proposed junkyard operation as yet, Mr. Andrew?
We have a revised license application and legal descriptions for all of those. When this action is final and the alley is removed, then we will sit down and work with the applicant on their screening plan, particularly on the the east side there, the west side of Cherry, what they're going to do on that particular section. And we'll also be working with supplemental landscaping as well.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open this up for the public hearing for any public to come before the commission concerning this item.
My name is Bob Wasco. I'm at 219 North Santa Fe. I'm here on behalf of both petitioners, Baum Farm and Ranch and LOJ Enterprises. I haven't got anything really to add. Just want to let you know we are here. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to respond to them.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. We have a first reading of an ordinance. Is there a motion for approval?
Mayor Mars, I move approval of ordinance number 07-10376, subject to the completion of all the required application, licensing, and screening plans.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 07-10376, subject to the completion of the licensing and screening and ordinance requirements. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of February 26, 2007. Item 6.2, authorize the purchase of a training simulator and accessories from IES Interactive Training. Item 6.3, resolution number 076370, authorizing a concession agreement with DGT Incorporated for the Dean Evans Stadium. Item 6.4, resolution number 076374, establishing the Community Art and Design Advisory Committee.
Are there any items that the commission would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? I would like to have item 6.4 pulled from the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval of 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3?
I will make that motion for approval of those items. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve consent agenda items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 5-0. Item 6.4, I just want to make a comment about this, specifically to Mr. Hyken and to the city manager. I think we've moved forward with regard to the community art and design with the guidelines that have been approved, and now with this community art and design advisory committee. I think it's important that this committee understands the grave responsibility it has and who they represent. They're representing all of the citizens of Salina. I think that's been made very clear to us as a city commission. I think it's been made very clear to you as well. And so I wish you well in this endeavor, and that the entire citizens have a chance and have their voice heard when it comes to public art. So
Thanks,
that was
Mr.
my
Mayor.
comment. I wanted to bring that forward and pass that on to you.
Thank you. We've made a strong effort to make sure that we have a lot of inclusion in what we're doing, and I would add that as part of the cultural assessment that we're doing, we have very specific points of discussion about the community art design program.
Thank you. Any other comments? Is there a motion to approve 6.4?
Mayor Morris, I move that we approve Resolution 07-6374, establishing the Community Art and Design Advisory Committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 07-6374. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item.
Item 7.1, annexation of city-owned property located north and west of the North Ohio Overpass. Sub-item 7.1A, first reading ordinance number 07-10377.
Mr. Andrews, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, this is an application to initiate the annexation. If you look at an aerial view of the North Ohio Overpass, we're looking at the northwest quadrant of the overpass project, and this is the area that contains essentially the area north and west of what was the intersection of Pacific Avenue and Ohio Street. This property was, except for the, I think you can see the item labeled there as Beverly Trust. The area shaded in gray there was acquired by the City of Salina to enable that project to go forward. And the piece there that's still in white labeled Beverly Trust is not owned by the City of Salina. This particular action is a city-initiated annexation of that property. There was a number of discussions we had with the owners of the Beverly property about possibly platting that property, bringing it into the city limits, and possibly being a site for relocation of some of the businesses displaced by the overpass project. But that did not occur, did not move forward. So now we think it's the right time to initiate this on the city's behalf. And your action today would bring those roadway portions into the city limits for maintenance, access control, traffic control, law enforcement, all of those items. And it would be primarily the roadway portion and also the area that's occupied by the detention pond on the west side of the overpass. You can do that of your own initiation because that is city-owned property. Once this action is taken and that the area essentially that is from here to here to here will be surrounded by the city on all four sides. If the city commission wished, you could initiate the annexation and inclusion of that into the city, or the other option is to wait until such time as somebody comes forward with a plan to plat and develop that property. But the only property this includes is that area shaded in gray. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
So the property that's on the east side of the overpass is currently in the city limits, and that goes up and goes around A1 galvanizing?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the red line here is the existing city limits, and there's a crossroads collision up here is inside the city limits. These properties here currently are not. A+ galvanizing is, but this whole quadrant is in the city. We identified that this was not in, but again, we put it off to see if the Beverleys were going to plat and annex their property. They did not. So it seemed like this was the time to move ahead with this.
The zoning on this goes to the city's agricultural zone. Is all that Beverly Trust land in the area to the northwest under the county's equivalent agricultural zone?
The county actually has that zoned industrial. It's not platted, but it's zoned that way. That's not binding on you in any way. At the time that that property is considered for annexation, the governing body of the city would be the body to decide what the appropriate zoning of that property was. We are just recommending that this piece right here, which is the pond and perhaps an open space area, be zoned agricultural, but again, that's up to you as to what you think the appropriate classification for that was. Since it's not proposed for any kind of development but open space, the ordinance that's in front of you designates that as agricultural.
So on the other side of the overpass, what is that zoned?
This piece here is zoned I3 as a remnant of the plat for the A+ galvanizing addition, and all of this property here is currently zoned I3. Those parcels were all included in the North Ohio overlay district, so despite the underlying zoning, any proposal to develop that would be subject to the overlay district requirements as well.
And as far as the ownership of that property on the other side, that triangle is not owned by the city, but everything
This is privately owned, this is all publicly owned.
publicly owned.
So this is owned by members of the My family, this is owned by members of the Beverly family.
Other questions of staff? Are there any public comments concerning this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Mars, I move approval on first reading of ordinance 07-10377.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 07-10377 on first reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Item
Next item.
7.2, approval of the landscaping pond design for the North Ohio Overpass Project number 001248.
Staff report, Mr. Place.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As a solution for locating fill material for the overpass projects, 2 ponds were established in the north area of the railroad tracks and south of the new Pacific Avenue and Old 40 locations. These ponds were to be an aesthetics feature for the area to be incorporated with the gateway idea and appeal of this location. The original intent was to fill these ponds with a combination of stormwater runoff and pumped water. This pumped water would come from a new well using the water rights purchased by the city through land acquisition for the project. Since that time, water conservation has become much more of a relevant issue. and the idea of pumping water to these ponds, no matter how significant on the total amount of water needed, seemed to be a little irresponsible to all parties involved. A final solution for these ponds was not included in the original overpass project scope and fee due to the variables that were expected to arise once excavation for the embankments took place. At this point, I'd ask Troy Eisenbrock from Wilson & Company to kind of review, give a quick PowerPoint presentation to you, reviewing what we talked about over at the study session, as well as some additional items that were brought to our attention after that, if I could.
Thank you.
Troy?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We have a combination of information to go over with you since I guess the options are fairly complex and kind of hard to follow. The top button?
Bottom.
There we go. We, under the current project, that most of the area is being taken care of with the exception of the bottoms of the ponds and the sides of the ponds. With the some of the questions we had during development of that project, those were kind of pulled out and aren't addressed under the current 2 contracts that we do have. We do have a variety of materials that are being planted on the project. One of the questions, I believe, from the study session was the extent of the trees that will be planned to go in. We've created this to try to illustrate the 2 different projects. The one in green includes all the trees that will be planted as part of the KDOT administered portion of the project, and then the contract that the city recently awarded for additional work on there includes all those trees that are shown in yellow, which essentially go around the outsides of the ponds to fairly well encompass the whole area. So there was a question about how well those would be screened. These trees are a combination of, I'm going to say, the larger trees and some smaller ones. There's some pin oak and some, looks like river birch and locust and plane tree and oak trees and red buds and some cedars. So there's a variety of trees in there that should fairly well screen those ponds as they mature and get larger. To recap real briefly some of the options we talked about last time, one, of course, is to continue as we originally envisioned the ponds, which would require construction of a clay liner excuse me, on the east pond, install a well pump water in there and maintain some constant level in those ponds. There's some additional cost to do that dirt work and to do a little bit of seeding, mainly the sides of the ponds. Another option we had were to go ahead and let the water fluctuate based on stormwater runoff. We would be looking at using some semi-aquatic plants to try to ensure that when those ponds did hold water and were covered for some time, that when the water drained out, there would still be some vegetation remaining. In this case, the clay liner would not be installed on the east pond, and there would be a fairly dramatic difference between the 2 in terms of how long they retained water. The cost for this was essentially in individual plants and associated work to maintain vegetation in that east pond. The third option we talked about was to try to size the ponds or the permanent pool to balance it with the expected runoff on average years. That would entail quite a bit of work in terms of moving dirt work since we've already have the ponds essentially excavated. There would still be some additional costs with the well and plantings, and this was, as you can see, one of the most expensive alternatives we looked at. Excuse me. The last option was essentially just focusing on the west pond, but still required the installation of a pump and well, and we would try to maintain a constant water level for that side of the project and let the east side fluctuate due to rainfall and runoff. We were still looking at doing some fairly intensive individual plantings and other type of treatments in the bottom of that pond to maintain vegetation after times it did hold water for a period of time. There were, based on that information presented to you and some comments we received there, we went back and explored a few other options. One of those that we're calling option 2 here essentially was a request of could we go back and look at using more native grasses, native plants that would have the ability to tolerate some of those periods of being flooded. And we've done that working with the subcontractor Cedar for the project, working with the landscape architect and Parks and Rec staff. We've met a couple of times and looked at that and done some research, and we think there's a seeding mix that contains some water-tolerant plants. It includes a lot more mix of native grasses and some wildflowers that would be used on the sides of the ponds, and then a slightly different mix and look on the bottom of the ponds. And we've gotten a fairly firm cost of that from the sub-consultant on the KDOT project, and with the thoughts that that could be rolled in there. And as you can see, it's at a cost of about $20,000 to go ahead and seed and mulch both sides of the ponds and the bottoms of the ponds. And that would be done, soon here when some of the other work on the project, if that was an option you would so choose. There'd be no work done in terms of a lining of the pond. There'd be no pump or well done, and these ponds would just be allowed to rise and fall, so to speak, as water runs into them.
Do I understand from this that this would become eligible to be participation part of the KDOT contract, or is that?
Yes, that would be the intent. The city's already maxed out the KDOT's participation, so it's the city's cost anyway. And
the city would still assume the entire cost? Okay.
On this latest revised option 2, that's a little bit different from the 2A and 2B that are in the blue sheet, that there would be no additional grading and no further attempt to taper the slope of the ponds, right?
Correct. I can. A couple other comments were made. Was I think some concerns about the erosion on the sides. Could we flatten those down? The ponds were designed with a 4-to-1 side slope, which once we get vegetation established should cover that. The right-of-way was purchased based on those limits, so we don't have much room to flatten those out unless we were to actually, pull dirt in from the sides. And with that, I don't think, without going to a lot of expense, we could flatten them much, maybe 5-to-1 or 6-to-1, so it wouldn't be a real substantial change in the slope. I think with the mulching and the seeding that's proposed, that will address those erosion concerns until we can get vegetation established.
Yeah. Is it anticipated that if we went with this option that these grasses would have to be mowed, or would they be a pretty much a maintenance-free cover?
I would think they would be pretty much maintenance-free. Yeah, Steve's nodding yes.
Okay. So my understanding, there would not, or there occasionally would be water standing in the west pond, or occasionally in both?
Depending on rainfall and other factors, both ponds could hold water. The big difference is when water does get into the west pond, it will hold it for quite a bit longer period of time than the east pond.
The other thing that was mentioned in the study session was that the area to the southwest has quite a bit of developable property on Old Pacific. I guess we're calling that Pacific Court or something now that it's dead-ended, so that if that developed, or when that develops, there will be more runoff into both these ponds. It'll run into the west pond, but then it automatically transfers over to the east pond.
It wouldn't get into the east pond until it reached a depth of approximately 6 feet, but otherwise that's correct.
So there could be, in the future, more runoff into these ponds.
Yes. The one other option, or comment was made to ask us to look into was, okay, if there are problems associated with storing water for periods of time, what could we do? Could we just pump it out of there? And we briefly looked into that. Additional costs associated with that, you would need to collect and convey the water and capture it and pump it into the storm sewer system, which we didn't go into detail in terms, tried to size pumps and lines and that, because one of the things we run into, the concern with the flat bottoms of those ditches, that they're still going to hold water, still would put the vegetation out, so we would still have to do some of the seeding that we're recommending doing anyway, so it'd be the cost of doing the seeding as well as the cost of doing physical improvements, so we didn't pursue that much. But we're roughly thinking that would be in the range of 4 to 5 times the cost of a well, so minimal, $40,000 to $50,000 of physical improvements out there to take care of that. So we dropped that from any further, I guess, refinement.
So this option, trying to summarize what you've said, is a natural native type approach to the environment that these ponds set in, as far as the types of grasses you're talking about, and the fact that they may vary. They may have water for extended periods of time. We could actually drown out those grasses, which would require some reseeding periodically, be some maintenance involved. But by doing this option, we still haven't eliminated any of the other options that you presented to us either.
Correct.
Okay.
Is this the KDOT mix of native grasses and wildflowers that they recommend for drainage, or is this a different mix?
No, this is a mix. We worked with a couple of sources to try to come up with different varieties that would do well in this situation. In the bottoms of the ponds, they're suggesting a mixture of Garrison creeping foxtail, western wheatgrass, Canlo switchgrass, brome, and then in all the cases we're putting an annual rye in that would die out after 1 year to help maintain the slope until some of the other grasses take hold. And on the sides, I think we're using a lot of these same grasses, but we're also mixing in some wildflowers for the aesthetic aspects of their, I guess, contribution to that area out there.
The planting materials that are around the perimeter or the outside of this that are shown in yellow on the image projected on the screen, those are also trees. And so there's some discussion as to whether or not the entire perimeter of this was there was plantings that were going to occur around the entire perimeter, and the answer to that is yes, there is. Any other questions?
Just a question on the drainage out in that part of town. It's my understanding that the water on the south side of Pacific Court will drain to the northeast into that pond. Is that right?
That's correct. South of where Pacific and Old 40 was located, all that water is designed to go into those ponds.
When it drains from the southwest to the northeast, how far west will it do that? From where ADM's retention pond is?
Correct. ADM's detention pond will continue on north through the recently constructed ditch and flows to the north and then out through the existing opening in the dike.
So the drainage east of that detention pond is what is the water that comes into this ditch?
Correct.
Okay. And on the, I guess it would be the northwest side of this new Pacific, that water is still going to go to the north, to the dike, to the north and to the west, or will it come?
On the west side, the drainage is generally to the north.
Generally to the north. Okay.
West of Ohio. Well, same thing east of Ohio as well, with the exception of the grading that was done and the detention pond put in place for the A-plus galvanizing. That is pumped back to the south and into the east pond. And similar situation on that side of the road. Any of the drainage south of where Pacific or Old 40 was relocated, that is designed to drain into the pond as well.
And when you looked at any development on the, it would be that the northwest section or whatever you want to call it, west of Ohio Street, any of that developed along Ohio Street, you anticipate that water would come back south, go west, go north?
It would go west or north depending on how they develop that. With the
John, go back to that map.
Yeah, that might be.
John, can you go back to the map?
area from here north, the like I said, it's fairly flat out there, but the general fall is to the north, and the available capacity of these detention ponds once this area developed was sized to meet. I think we met a 25-year storm, but that was about all we could handle with the fairly shallow depth we had to meet to utilize the existing storm drainage system. So we essentially had to make a determination that, with the exception of A-plus galvanizing, all the drainage from here north would have to be accommodated and go to the north as it presently is, naturally, slowly but naturally flowing. So everything north would need to continue north, with the exception of A-plus, and then we would capture everything south.
And contributing factor to that is the ability of the storm sewer system that's there to remove the water once it reaches the storm sewer elevation to discharge.
Correct.
So you couldn't, that was the controlling factor because of the physical size of the storm sewer in being able to handle any more than a 25-year rain.
Correct.
And that's with both ponds full of water. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Both ponds, to that initial
6 foot level.
assumption we made of 9 foot deep.
9 feet.
So it's got 3 foot of detention storage that it can accommodate and flow back out by gravity over about 24 hours or so.
So the idea of trying to capture more area to run into these ponds to keep them full of water, that may work in an agricultural setting, but when you're dealing with a developed setting where you pave and you have the frequency of runoff increases where you have no percolation, you have to take in consideration the ability of the storm sewer to take away the excess water once you get above a 25-year rain.
Correct. And that was one of the suggestions I think one of the landowners made, was why can't we just re-ditch and divert that water there? And it will work in a short time, but once you get that developed, and whether that's 5 or 10 or however many years down the road, trying to cut off that drainage and get it corrected to its original intent poses difficulties for future commissioners and city staff that we didn't pursue going that route. Plus the impacts of trying to ditch that from the essentially ADM's area to the east. There was a fairly deep ditch involved, and we'd have to take more right away from the landowner, and he wasn't receptive to that, so we didn't pursue that option further at that point.
Commissioners, just a note on this as well. When you look at the property to the north and northwest of what is now New Pacific, any of that in that area, that the ditch that was constructed there is not intended to take that as is. There will have to be a drainage solution for any and all development in that area. So the ditch was only intended to address existing drainage, agricultural drainage today, and anything that already drained that direction, but not at a developed state.
It's the undeveloped quantities that it's able to handle.
Yes.
And so the discharge rate by which you develop a piece of property, you still get that undeveloped rate of discharge, and then you have to control it to that amount of discharge based on how you handle the water on your site. That's why detention ponds are required and those issues in order to not to exceed that pre-developed or the agricultural developed level.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you very much for your report. Any public comments? Please.
Harold Morrison, 1605 North Ohio. And we already have the development of the ADM, which is, what, 130,000 square feet of under blacktop or roof, which is going to run all that water down your ditch.
Into the pond.
Why wasn't that diverted to the ponds? It's 2 foot elevation difference.
In case you're, I'm Ernestine Morrison. I also live at 1605 North Ohio. In case you're unfamiliar with that area, we are the land directly north, on the north side of the dike, directly north of the West Pond. And the ditch, of course, is definitely a factor in our land farming, because all that water goes through the dike, if it does, and basically destroys wheat, drowns it. So that's why we're here. That's our concern, that the more you develop, the more concrete you pour, and the fact that you have empty ponds, and I asked Mr. O'Leary one time, won't it look kind of funny if your plants are all dying and our wheat is drowning? That wouldn't make much sense. So I'm sure there would be problems to change anything at this point. We just would like for you to know that we become very concerned when you start talking about, oh, well, we just drain all that water north. And from anything that develops all around there, as though we weren't there and it didn't matter. So, but we are there, and it does matter a great deal. So that's we just want to remind you that you seem to have water there. You have a water issue, and yet you have deliberately channeled water that somehow should have been used into empty ponds north onto fields that don't need it and don't want it.
And there's such little development east of ADM for that water to run into the ponds. The development's probably going to be to the west of ADM, and all that water then is going to come down on us, because that's the way the culvert under Pacific comes north right into to the new ditch, and then that just speeds the water along that much quicker down on us. If it had been left just, well, there's enough elevation there that it wouldn't run right down on us. Because the way it was, the current culvert from ADM went north under the old Pacific, and then it was just puddling there at the Kenny's car lot, and it wasn't getting away.
Yep. Part of the issue that you're faced with here is you have to go back to conditions prior to the dike system even being built. And you have to understand the lay of the land, and as far as the way the land drained at that point in time.
I have lived there all my life.
I understand.
And I know how the water drains. But also, and this is not city's problem, when Ohio Street was built, the culverts that were put into it, which would drain then on down, were set higher than the fields, so this also becomes a natural barrier to stopping the water from continuing on its course to the Salina River.
I understand. My point is that the pond size that we have, as far as its ability to hold water, and the area that's draining into it, that area satisfies the requirements for up to a 25-year rain. I know you see the ponds are empty now.
Well, we understand that, sir.
But when there's a rain, when we get out of the drought and back into a time when we have the rains we're talking about, there's not any storage capacity left in those ponds for the water you're talking about.
Couldn't a culvert drain it to the ponds and then leave the other culvert there to drain it away when the ponds are full?
You'll still get the same amount of water.
No, well, not all the time. Only when the ponds get totally full. Drain the water to the ponds until they're full and hold them full, and then if we have another big rain, your 25-year, because we've lived there, like I say, I've lived there all my life, and yes, we've had water. In the 51 flood, it was in my parents' home, but since then it's been all around us because of Ohio Street forms a natural dam to block the water on our side of the road until it overflows it, and then it eases the pressure. But we understand that it's...
You were saying that, I heard you ask the question about the buildings on the north, the southwest area, when that builds up. You said that was all going to drain into the ponds.
That's correct.
But that's only that little area.
Between
ADM back to the east is all the area that will drain into the pond now.
That's correct.
But then if you develop west, then you're dumping all that hard surface water down on me.
That hard surface water will be retained and will not be discharged at any rapider rate than it currently is in the undeveloped state. That's what's required during the development. Whether you understand or agree with that or not, that is the requirements. They cannot discharge it at any greater rate than it currently is discharging in the undeveloped state.
Well, the ADM water is only going to retain for what, 24 hours?
That's correct. And then
you
they're
don't think
required
it-
to discharge that water.
And you don't think with the new ditch to the north, that is not running down quicker than it would with it not being the ditch there?
The rate at which ADM is allowed to discharge that water during the time they're pumping it out has to be at or less than the pre-developed rate of discharge. Those are the rules, and that's how it was designed.
To check it.
Well, it was designed, there was a drainage study done. The discharge quantities were calculated, and they were sized based on the engineering data that's required for them to do that.
That's for the retention pond.
Retention and discharge.
But then, when it gets in the new
Detention ponds.
waterway, that's going to discharge faster than a normal undeveloped field. You sure?
No, it's not.
It's not going to?
No, it's not allowed to.
Well, how are you gonna
Based on
stop
the
it?
design
We're gonna make them
criteria,
build new
because of the
detention
rate of
ponds.
discharge, the pump size and the amount of discharge that they're doing within 24 hours after the rain event.
No, I understand that, the pump discharge. But what I'm saying is, then when it gets discharged and over on the north side and into the ditch, that ditch is going to flow faster than a normal agricultural field. Because it's cut to run to the, you've done away with the natural level of, or elevation of the land. Because
It's all based on the quantity of water and the slope that it's running on, correct?
Okay.
Well, we just wanted to remind you that that dry ponds, that you are channeling water that could be used for ponds away, and perhaps it should have been designed some other way.
I appreciate your time in coming and bringing this to our attention. I hope you understand that the process that's gone through here and the design that's been done has tried to take into consideration the water that's discharging and how it's discharged. Any other public comment?
Mr. O'Leary, I'm sorry to speak up, but Mr. O'Leary did say that we had the regress if the water began to impact our income and the planting of the wheat, that we did have that was when we hired a lawyer and we would sue. That was his solution. So we have been informed of that.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. We have various options before us. Any additional information that is necessary in order to move this forward?
Well, my initial thought is I like this new option that was presented today. To me, it's kind of a choice of aesthetics versus this symbolic impact of pumping water into these ponds. Last week I was sitting there thinking, well, I don't know if two wrongs make a right. We probably wouldn't have designed it this way originally. Well, I know we wouldn't have if this water situation come up earlier. But as Mr. Timmel was saying earlier, 85% of all the water used in the state is for agricultural uses, so you could say that this is a drop in the bucket. On the other hand, sometimes things have large symbolic value that can have a practical impact as well. So I guess I like this option because it gives us a chance to kind of monitor it, and I don't want to ultimately create an eyesore out there, which would totally go against what we've tried to do from the very beginning of the design of the project.
Are you willing to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we go along with the option 2 that was presented to us, which we would seed the ponds with water-tolerant grasses and monitor the results.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve option number 2, which consists of seeding the ponds with water-tolerant grasses and monitor the results at estimated cost of $20,000. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I would like to add, Mayor Mars, that I think it is important that we monitor the results so that it doesn't become an eyesore. I know that KDOT mows the native grasses once every 3 or 4 years to be sure that woody vegetation hasn't cropped in the way, and I would hope that we would do the same in the city so that it does stay attractive. And I would also hope that our development review will indeed continue to take into account the water issues and the water runoff issues that Mr. and Mrs. Morrison brought before us today.
Thank you. Next item's administration.
Mayor Mars, I have to recuse myself from the next item.
Thank you.
Item 8.1, Resolution Number 076368, authorizing an agreement with Booker Willis and Ratliff Corporation to provide engineering services.
Mr. Place.
Thank you again, Mayor and Commissioners. Since the departure of our last traffic engineer, the engineering department has been in a search for a replacement. This search has been very difficult. In an effort to satisfy our department's needs for experience and expertise in this area, we have decided to test the hiring of an outside consultant to do our traffic engineering work. This consultant is to be hired for the 2007 fiscal year with a maximum contract amount of $25,000. The engineering division has teamed with the utilities department to send out a letter requesting on-call services for both of our departments for the needs that we have. The engineering division recommends contracting with Booker Willis and Ratliff Corporation for our traffic engineering needs. We anticipate using this consultant for all of our traffic engineering needs under $10,000. If for any reason we have a traffic engineering project come about that we estimate to be above $10,000 mark, we plan to hire an engineer on a project-specific basis following the established criteria for selecting a design consultant. Based on the maximum fee and rates applied by Booker Willis and Ratliff, we estimate that this $25,000 will give us about 6 weeks of a full-time traffic engineer. The funding for this contract will be allocated from salary savings due to the vacant traffic engineering position. The budget will be amended mid-year to reflect this change. It is recommended that the City Commission approve resolution number 076368, authorizing an agreement with Booker Willis and Ratliff Corporation for engineering services in the amount not to exceed $25,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions of staff? I first commend staff for taking this approach because I think these on-call contracts are a good way to address the issues such as traffic engineering, which is not a ongoing full-time requirement. You will have specific projects, and so when you say 6 weeks worth of time, that doesn't mean that 6 weeks from now you're going to run out
Correct.
Of this money. That means that if you had a full-time person, the cost for that person we would spend that in 6 weeks. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Staffing cost is roughly.
If you, based on unit rates, you'd actually not expend it on that particular person that soon, but we figure the number of hours, it would be comparative.
All right. Did you get, with this contract, have they tied into specific rates that they're guaranteeing for a year?
Yes, for each specific person, whether it be a senior engineer or junior traffic engineer or anything like that, we do have rates with all that, yes.
Okay.
And then their overhead rate also.
You tied that down for a year for this?
Correct.
Okay. Other questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mayor Mars, I'd move for approval of Resolution 076368, authorizing an agreement with Bucher, Willis, and Ratliff Corporation to provide engineering services in an amount not to exceed $25,000.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 076368. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Devine recusing herself. Next item.
Item 8.2, Resolution Number 076369, authorizing an agreement with Wilson and Company Incorporated to provide engineering services.
Ms. Tasker, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is the agreement referenced by Mr. Place. It's very similar to the concept of the BWR agreement. The need for this agreement was based upon the retirement of the environmental compliance specialist in June of 2006. At that time, the position description was upgraded to include design review team responsibilities, and the position was upgraded to a utility engineer. Similar to what Mr. Carlton Place referenced, we're not having any applicants that can fill that position at this time. And for that reason, we have chosen to contract with Wilson and Company engineers and architects for the miscellaneous utilities department on-call services, which were outlined in the attached agreement. For specific design projects, studies, or engineering agreements that would exceed the $10,000, the City of Salina professional service selection guidelines would be utilized. The agreement is written with an amount not to exceed of $25,000 and will expire 1 year from the date of the agreement. The funding for this contract will be allocated from the salary savings due to the vacant utility engineering position. And again, we'll amend the budget in mid-year to reflect this change. It is recommended that the City Commission approve Resolution Number 076369, authorizing an agreement with Wilson and Company Incorporated engineers and architects in the amount not to exceed $25,000. Jason Slickburn with Wilson and Company is here today, and Jason and I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions of staff?
So who handles the environmental compliance now?
That is being accomplished greatly by myself. I've been reviewing the plans and hours sometime different than 8 to 5, and Sean Pelcher has been doing the backflow prevention inspection, and Kurt Williams has been doing the grease interceptor inspection. So we've spread it out some, but we're put quite a workload on many of the utilities department staff. And this agreement then would provide for us to contract with Wilson and Company to do some of these miscellaneous items to allow us more time to do our intended job descriptions.
Ms. Tasker, to what do you attribute our lack of ability to attract qualified candidates for this and the other position? Is it a lack of a pool of available candidates, or?
That would appear to be the situation, that we're having difficulty finding professional engineers that choose to work in this area. And I think we've been working through the salary study, which may have some relief on that, but the number of candidates that have actually applied have been very minimal, and their qualifications have been less than desirable.
Thank you.
Again, I commend staff for this approach because I think it's the most efficient way to spend the funds and attract and be able to attain the professional skills that we need in the time frame that we need them on a short-term basis. So I think it's the proper thing to do based on the condition of the environment that we're facing with the qualified people that are just not there or not capable to come to us to do the work we need. So, any other questions of staff? Thank you. Public comments. Seeing none, will bring it back to the commission.
Mayor Myers, I move approval of Resolution 076369, authorizing an agreement with Wilson and Company, Inc. to provide engineering services in an amount not to exceed $25,000.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 076369. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item.
Item 8.3, Resolution Number 076371, providing for the advisability and authorizing improvements in the Quail Meadows Estates, Project Number 06-1608.
Mr. Place, staff report.
Thank you once again, Mayor and Commissioners. Petition number, attached to your packet is petition number 4294, submitted by Mr. Stan Byquist, President of Quail Meadows Estates Incorporated, on February 27th of 2007, requesting certain street drainage, water, and sewer improvements to serve 17 residential lots in Quail Meadow Estates Phase 3. The petition is signed by a majority of the resident owners of record of property liable for assessment under the proposal. Therefore, the petition clearly meets the statute requirements for sufficiency under the Kansas state statutes. 100% of the cost of the improvements are proposed to be assessed to the benefit district. These cost estimates include construction contingencies, inspection, design, and bonding interest costs. The property owners may choose to pay their share of the project costs as a lump sum payment in the spring of 2008 or as a special assessment tax over a 15-year period beginning in December of 2008. The petitioner also has the option of submitting a letter of credit for 35% of the project costs or 20% in cash for financial security, which will be due before the City Commission can award the bid. The bid date for the project is tentatively scheduled for March 27th of 2007. All costs are to be assessed against the improvement district with a per lot assessment estimated to be just under $20,000. This project will be temporarily financed through a temporary note likely issued first part of August and rolled into long-term bonds in 2008. Property owners will have the opportunity to pay the assessment in full prior to the bond issue. If they elect not to do so, the assessment plus related interest costs will be spread over 15 years in equal annual installments. It is recommended that the City Commission approve Resolution Number 076371 of advisability and authorization establishing the Special Assessment Improvement District and authorize staff to set the bid date for the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of staff? Is this a project that the city's going to actually bid and manage the construction of?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Other questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the Commission for action.
Mayor Morris, I move that we approve Resolution 07-6371, providing for the advisability and authorizing improvements in the Quail Meadows Estate Addition Phase 3, Project 06-1608.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 076371. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item.
Item 8.4, Resolution Number 076372, providing for the advisability and authorizing improvements on West Diamond Drive.
Mr. Scragg, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Pursuant to your approval last week of a resolution of an intent annexation agreement with Comco Inc. and an annexation ordinance, we've received petition number 4295 executed by Speedco, Bob and Jan Strack of OSTS, Roger and Michelle Sanborn, Michael and Elizabeth Harvey of Bobcat of Salina and Comco Inc. And as Mr. Place indicated, there are statutory provisions regarding whether a petition is sufficient, and suffice it to say that the petitioners represent 96.8% of the total area subject to assessments, therefore it is statutorily compliant. The preliminary engineering and feasibility report that's been attached to this staff report is identical to the one that you received previously, and I will elaborate on the distributions. In summary, the estimated cost allocated with the individual components of the project are as follows. Water, $211,505. Sanitary sewer, $80,197. Street, $403,448. storm, $117,493, for a total cost of the project of $812,644. And I would note that's an estimated cost. Furthermore, then, the individual improvements are allocated as follows. Streets, the costs are allocated 50% north and 50% south of West Diamond Drive, with each lot an unplatted tract in the portion of the improvement district located on the south side of West Diamond Drive, which will be parcels 1 through 6, being assessed equally per square foot for 50% of the total street costs, with the remaining 50% of the street improvements on the north being assessed 2/3 against parcel 7 and 1/3 against parcel 8. Sewer similarly is allocated 50% north and 50% south, with parcels 1 through 4 all located on the south side of West Diamond Drive being allocated per square foot, and the remaining 50% on the north being allocated 2/3 against parcel 7 and 1/3 against parcel 8. Storm sewer is allocated 100% to parcels 1 through 4, which are all located on the south side of West Diamond Drive, since those improvements exclusively benefit from the storm sewer improvements. And the water is further delineated into a number of different components. Specifically, the upgrade to the existing system beginning at North 9th Street and terminating at the eastern limit of the benefit district is one component. The water main installation paralleling West Diamond Drive is the second component. The portion of the water line loop from West Diamond Drive north to a point parallel to Monarch Road is a third component, and then the water line loop picking up from that terminus to the north-south portion of Monarch Road is the fourth component. Each of those are allocated differently, and I would summarize them as follows. The existing system upgrade is 100% allocated to the city as a cost concurrent with the October 2005 Bucher Willis and Ratliff Diamond Drive Master Plan Report. The second component, being the West Diamond Drive water main, has the cost allocated 50% north and 50% south of West Diamond Drive, with parcels 1 through 4 being equally assessed per square foot, and the northern 50% being allocated 2/3 against parcel 7 and 1/3 against parcel 8. The north-south leg of the water line from West Diamond Drive to a point parallel to Monarch Road is to be funded by the city at 100%, with the intent to recover 50% of those costs from parcel 10 as a benefit fee under 126A19 if the subject parcel should ever benefit by connecting to the main. And it should be noted that parcels 7 and 8 were not assessed the remaining 50%, since they have been allocated benefit from the east-west water lines both on West Diamond Drive as well as the portion north of parcel 8. Of parcel 8. And then the fourth component, the water line loop from the terminus of that north-south portion to Monarch Road, is funded 100% by the city, with the intent to recover costs from parcel 9 as a benefit fee under 126A19. So the resulting special assessment district then is comprised of 3 primary components. Property subject to special assessments, which is parcels 1 through 6 according to the allocation methodology that I've described. Property subject to ag deferrals, which is parcels 7 and 8. And property subject to benefit fees that's provided by KSA 126A19 at the time that those subject properties receive benefits, and those are parcels 9 and 10. I would also offer clarification to the documents that you received, in that on the resolution itself on page 4, there's a reference in paragraph F to Exhibit A, which should actually be Exhibit B. And on page 5, the cost recovery summary includes a provision that parcel 10 will be assessed 100% when, as I reported, it should be 50%. With respect to conformance with the comprehensive plan, we've identified that the city's shared vision statement provides that the City Commission will have committed to providing the highest quality city services possible within available resources, and that Salina will encourage and be supportive of industrial development, economic expansion, market-driven tax-based growth, and homegrown entrepreneurialism. Additionally, then, the strategic goals include goal number 3, the city will provide the highest quality of services consistent with governing body direction and available resources and staff commitment. And goal number 4, the city will maintain growth and development policies that are updated to reflect current conditions and desired growth direction. As a fiscal note, this project is to be financed with general obligation bonds as a special assessment benefit district project, with the cost suballocated as follows. City costs not subject to reimbursement, $72,438. Special assessments, $395,698. Ag deferrals, $278,204, and 126A19 cost recovery, $66,303. At this time, it's recommended that the City Commission approve Resolution 076372, providing for the advisability and authorization establishing the West Diamond Drive Special Assessment Improvement District, and authorize staff to proceed with soliciting of bids for the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions of staff? Any public comments? Bringing it back to the commission, I would like to state that this is a culmination of a lot of work that's taken a long time to get here. I think it's also an example of how in past there's been development done, buildings built prior to the time that utilities were put in place, streets improvements put into place, which has complicated this whole process. And I appreciate the fact that all the parties have finally been able to come together and get to this point and putting this behind us and creating this property so it can be developed.
Mayor Mars, I'd move approval of Resolution 076372, providing for the advisability and authorizing improvements on West Diamond Drive, Project 061593.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 076372. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item.
Item 8.5, Resolution Number 076373, amending the City of Salina comprehensive fee schedule by adding rental rates for sporting events at the Bicentennial Center.
Staff report, Mr. Rawlings.
Thank you very much. As I indicated to you in the background portion of the blue sheet that you have before you, we have found ourselves struggling with trying to find an appropriate category to place the Kansas Cagers as the particular current example, since they've been playing at our building began playing in 1998. We have gone through 2 or 3 different approaches in trying to determine the appropriate place to place them, and as you can probably imagine, when the rental rates were originally developed for the Bicentennial Center, professional or semi-professional sports were not really being contemplated. In fact, the last time we raised or reviewed the rates was the year just prior to the Cagers coming into Salina. As you also know, the Kansas Cagers have been making requests or comments regarding the fact that the rates that they pay at the Bicentennial Center are types of things that they're struggling with a little bit as they try to continue to maintain the team in Salina. They have also asked for us to look at anything we can do to perhaps assist them. I'm a little reluctant to do anything directly for them, but since, as I noted in here, the Cagers began playing, we have had inquiries from several other sporting franchises. Now, honestly, I don't think many of those are viable to come into Salina, but several have expressed some serious interest in it, and in fact, we continue to be in I wouldn't quite call it negotiation, but serious discussion with 1 or 2 of those. At any rate, it has almost universally been discussed by these other franchises, the fact that there is no partnership possibilities with the Bicentennial Center. Many privately run arenas are able to offer public-private partnerships with our particular sports rental rates. We're not able to do that. However, as we began to investigate this a little more and try to brainstorm possible ways to benefit them as well as potentially benefit us, we began to look at the specific or the possibility of making a specific category for professional or semi-professional sports. And as you do see on the blue sheet, we are recommending that we reduce the base rate for professional or semi-professional sports if they commit to multiple dates in the building, but we are proposing to add a potential incentive that would allow us to benefit as they become a little more successful too. So at any rate, the request is that we reduce the rate from $970. By the way, that rate will stay for other events, but for professional and semi-professional, we reduce that to $800 per day. But we do add an incentive of charging them 10% of any paid admissions over 2,000 at any particular performance or game. As you'll note in the fiscal note, it does have the potential to reduce the rent to the center by as much, if you do the math, by as much as about a little over $2,500 over a 15-game season, utilizing the Cagers as the example. And in the last 2 years, that would have been the case. 3 and 4 years ago, that would not have been. I think there's an attachment to your blue sheet that kind of shows you some of what the possibilities would have been, both for them and for us. And I think their continued commitment to trying to bring the Cagers back to Salina and provide quality entertainment for our community is frankly driving a little bit of our request or our desire to do what we can to assist. And this seemed like a good way for us to try this public-private partnership. We have listed 2 areas in the shared vision statement as far as the conformance of the strategic plan are concerned. We likewise believe that the city's commitment to high-quality services would be and could be better reflected by a potential public-private partnership here, and trying to be somewhat forward-thinking in ways that we might do this in a public facility. And paragraph J, that we do feel that we would like to positively reward homegrown entrepreneurialism as well with the current sports franchise, and all the ones that we've talked to have generally considered the same type of an arrangement, whether or not they relocate to Salina or they begin a franchise here. So at any rate, it is our recommendation that the City Commission consider and approve Resolution Number 076373, amending the rental rate for professional and semi-professional sports only at the Bicentennial Center by reducing the base rate to $800 per day plus 10% of the gross ticket sales for any paid admission over 2,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Yeah. How many days is multiple days minimum?
Well, we generally consider that at least 3, and that is considered, or that would be pulling from the tournament type of a rate, and that's certainly something that administratively we would be interpreting it as a minimum of 3.
How does this affect something like the recent part of a rodeo type event, I guess it was Professional Bull Riders Association, 2 days in a row?
It would not have affected that at all, because that is a commercial event that falls under a different category of our rate structure, and we do charge a different rate for that. It's a higher base rate, and it's a percentage, with a percentage of the ticket revenue, we take the higher of the 2. And so as a commercial event and not one that is based here, we would, that would not have been affected.
Other questions of staff?
Attendance figures can be calculated in very interesting ways. Curious how you say tickets sold over 2,000 for any game. How do you handle comp tickets to radio stations, media outlets?
Those are comp tickets and not paid. Those would not be used in the calculation that we would utilize in this incentive. We keep close track of the difference between paid tickets. In fact, we're the ones who sell probably 80 to 90% of those, and we're the ones who have to issue the comp tickets. So we have a game by game accounting of comps versus paid, and we're basing this on paid.
Thank you.
The one thing I might mention, too, is that the other thing that we benefit from is not just ticket sales, but we benefit by their success because a good portion of our revenue doesn't come from ticket sales or box office fees. It comes from concessions, and that is certainly something we would like to see increased as well.
Other questions of staff?
Any merchandise that the Cagers or whoever may sell, is there a piece of that that comes to the Bicentennial Center?
There isn't with the Cagers. From the time they came in, they really did not have a large amount of merchandise to where it was really worth our time and trouble, in our opinion, to go in, count them in, count them out. Their merchandise sales have not been significant, so we have not taken a portion of that. We do that on large events, concerts, some of those one-time events that come in, but not with the Cagers.
But that would be a part of any other team
be.
that comes in?
Yes, it would be part of the negotiation, I'm sure, that they would come in with. They always come in wanting also a piece of our concessions, and we've been very stubborn in not giving that up.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mayor, I'd move for approval of Resolution 076373, amending the City of Salina comprehensive fee schedule by adding rental rates for sporting events at the Bicentennial Center.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 076373. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item.
Mayor, I move that the City Commission recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss with the City Attorney a matter subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of the matter would waive that privilege and adversely affect the City's interest in the matter, and reconvene in this room at,
Say 5:40.
at 5:40. Is there any action anticipated by law?
We do not anticipate any action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the City Commission move into executive session for 10 minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
5:40 is close enough. That gives you
Non-proliferation